This is a part of a sort of winter webinar series that we've got going on. Last week, I think it was, you had Andy Dibben on green manures, and then there are another sort of 3 sessions. So check out the Knowledge Hub that says what sessions are coming up, and there's the registration links. Anyway, I'll hand over to Ben, and thank you for joining us.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. We'll just try and get this presentation up. Hopefully that works. Yeah, that's good. Okie doke. So let's kick off. So yeah, this is about year-round vegetable production, as has already been said. Sorry, just trying to get, oh, there we go. I've got the next slide. So a bit of an outline of what we're going to do. If obviously we don't have to stick to anything. This is all pretty informal, and we'll see how it goes. A brief sort of whip round of everyone, some introductions, a bit about the growing season extension with some interspersed questions and discussions, a section on crop flow, then another section on the Hungry Gap, followed by a bit of a summary and some sort of final discussions. So we have got some slots in at the end of each of those main sections for discussions, but obviously feel free to chip in any point in any of the slides, and we're just trying to get as much debate going as possible, really. So yeah, so welcome. So I thought maybe just quickly go around, say who you are, some details about your farm, maybe about who you're selling to, and what you're hoping to get out of the meeting. So yeah, my name's Ben. I'm from ADAS, from an agricultural background. I'm currently growing on about 1/4 of an acre veg in the no-dig system. Got a 25-metre polytunnel. Little bit of mechanisation, just a tractor with a tip trailer that we get to use every now and again, but mostly manual. And it's just for friends and family. And I'm hoping to learn as much as I can from everyone else that's here. So I don't know if you want to go next, Chris.
Yeah, I'm Chris Creed. I'm an horticultural advisor working in Wales. I'm just back from 2 days in Wales actually, and I work sort of pan horticulture, but you know, I do some work on veg. So between me and Ben, I think we're hopefully, and Adam, we'll get most areas covered. And it's good to see you all coming on the meeting. Next.
Adam, do you want to?
Yeah, well, I work at Cleveland's in Cardigan. We're farm shop operators with 10 acres of land that we crop for our own supply. We do a little bit of wholesale, but we're sort of specialists in classic market garden crops, protected cropping, as well as some higher value field cropping. Next.
I can't see who's next on the screen. 1 second. Georgie, would you like to go next?
Okay. I grow ornamentals in a wall garden that we've just taken on for wildlife, but there's a lot of space, and I come from a market gardening background in the Vale of Evesham. So I thought that because there's over an acre in the wall garden, that might possibly go into market gardening. We're already growing veg for ourselves. I just want to see if it was possible, but we're in mid Wales and there's not a massive market, so I just wanted to sort of look into it.
Thank you, Georgie. Lydia?
Hi everyone, I'm a PhD researcher looking at horticulture systems in Wales, production and supply, and the influence of market retail systems upon producers. So it's great to meet some more producers and potential participants for my research. Thanks.
Thank you. Emma?
Hi, yeah, I'm Emma. Got a 5-acre market garden in mid Wales. Hello, Chris again. Seen him this
Hi,
week.
Emma.
And yeah, we do veg, flowers, nuts, and I'm a horticultural tutor. I noticed that Annie's got my name tag as well because Annie works for us on the farm.
Annie, do you want to say anything or? No? Lana? We'll come back to Lana. What about William?
Here we are, here I am.
Oh, sorry.
All right. I live in mid Wales. I'm a cut flower grower, but I'm interested in, this is why you'll probably hear my dog. That's why I'm on mute. He's pretty loud dog. But I actually want to intersperse vegetables amongst my flowers. So that's why I'm sort of listening. That's all really.
Thank you, thanks. And William?
You're on mute, William.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now we can.
Yeah. Okay. Apologies. I can't work out how to get my my screen up. But I'm glad you can hear me. And I'm glad to be in the meeting. I'm in Upper Bryn Aman. I'm growing on about, I think I'm in about 3/4 acre of production of vegetables. And this will be, I think this coming up now will be about my 5th season. And I just sell to markets, I've got no other outlets, just the, I try and keep it as local as possible, Swansea markets, but I do get to Cardiff now and again. Yeah, that's about it from me.
And you
Thanks.
were looking at flowers, William, as well a bit, were you?
I would like to introduce flowers as well to take to the market, particularly perennials.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we got a few veg and flower people on the call, so there's no reason why the two don't go hand in hand, really, because if you're doing direct retail local markets, it's virtually the same market. So it's interesting that you know, I think 3 or 4 of us are doing flowers. Yeah.
Have I missed anybody? I can't quite see with the screen.
Well, we've not had we got
I
two
think
Emma,
that is,
we've had 2 Emma Maxwell's. I mean, the other one was what, Anna, was it? Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry, Emma,
Lovely.
who was the other one on your name?
Anna works for us. She's taking over the veg growing.
Yeah,
So
we met.
introduce yourself, Anna.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm working with Emma, doing an apprenticeship at the moment. Sorry, I didn't want to talk before my daughter was being noisy. She's okay now.
Nice to meet you again, Anna.
Yeah,
Okay,
good to see you.
handing back to you, Ben.
Okay, nice to meet everyone. So I suppose one of the first things to talk about for season extension is the climate. So there are sort of frost maps available. There's a link here to this website, and not everyone is obviously in control of where they're growing, but it's interesting to note. So the sort of the green areas are last frost seen in sort of mid to late April. And the bluer areas are sort of from late March. So if you have a look at sort of the bottom end of Cornwall, which is where a lot of early veg is grown, you see that sort of blue area there. But actually it turns out that the Gower, Pembrokeshire, the Clean, and sort of Anglesey up the top actually have a lot of blue in them as well. So we do have parts of Wales where you can produce a lot of early veg. And obviously right on that microclimate on the coastline, you do get a lot fewer frost days. In fact, some parts you might get hardly any, even through the whole winter. So that sort of microclimate effect can be very useful in season extension.
It looks from that map, Ben, as though we got more or less every climate then in Wales.
More or less, yeah. Apart from like the Isles of Lundy and the Scillies, where you've got almost none. But I suppose, yeah, along the coast, you'd have a similar climate to them, I guess.
And then we got the sort of high up areas that's in the late, very late areas, aren't we?
Yeah, stuff coming in May and June through mid Wales.
Yeah. Interesting slide.
Yeah, I mean, it shows actually even with the the green areas, there's actually quite a large amount of southern and North Wales, which has really good growing temperatures.
I think you commented yesterday, Emma, didn't you, about frosts right up until sort of mid-June in mid Wales.
The last couple of years we've had midsummer and then the 14th of June. Yes, not good for growing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's difficult. So yeah, other things that we can do to try and extend the season is using various equipment. So I imagine a lot of people have come across sort of fleece. It's, for anyone that hasn't, it's essentially the same material that they make those single-use COVID masks out of. It's a very thin plastic fleece material. You sort of lay it on the crop. You dig it in periodically along the length. It's very easy to just sort of roll out across the field. Some of the pros are that it is very cheap and cost effective. Doesn't require particularly high skilled labor. You can actually layer it single or double depending on how much heat you want to increase under the crop for the crop. If anyone isn't in an organic system and is spraying, it's compatible with being able to spray boom spraying over the top, and it can offer a bit of pest control. Some people do use it in conjunction with mesh, or the various meshes for either insect or bird control. But a point to note that actually meshes in themselves will offer some warmth and increase the heat units for your crop. Some of the cons is that unfortunately it is a single-use plastic. I mean, if you're very careful, you might be able to reuse it, but typically it's not. You can also got to be mindful that in some weather conditions it can store cold. So if it's quite cold at night and then it's a very overcast day, you're not getting any sun through, and so you'll actually end up with a cold pocket underneath. It's just something to sort of be mindful of, not necessarily something you can always do something about because of it being a single-use plastic. It can get quite humid under there, which some growers do use fleece all year round, but something to be mindful of, particularly towards the end of the season if you're doing, say, leafy salad crops with mildew and those sorts of things towards the end of the seed growing season. And predominantly it is used for sort of shoulder of the season extension. It's not as much used sort of through the whole of winter. But yeah, I don't know, does anyone have any experiences?
I know in soft fruit we put it on if we get frosty nights, and it does turn about 2 or 3 centigrade degrees, and if you put on 2 sheets of fleece, this is a 35-gram fleece, it will turn up to 5 degrees, so it can be quite useful to just roll out the fleece and take it off. As you say, it does prevent it warming up again. So if you take it on, if you're on a small scale, you can just put tires, or the best thing to use is sandbags really to weigh it down, and you can keep rolling it up and using it again. The other thing they do around here, I've got a mega sort of salad grower in my area, and they use it for stopping salad leaf, and they use it to stop thunderstorms, etc., splashing grit up into the crop, so they don't have to do as much washing. So they often fleece up very, very regularly, depending on the forecast, if they see rain coming. And these are on sort of 25-30 acre fields, a lot of people, but they do get it done. Is there any other experience of fleece?
Yeah, just obviously, the December scary frost period, fleece was certainly pretty useful in tunnels, although even double layers of fleece against -10, -8 we certainly had may not have been enough, but we always use the thicker one now. For years we persisted with the thinner ones, which rip and are very one use. Some of the thicker grades, if you can get hold of the dimensions you want, are a lot more durable, and obviously they provide more thermal protection. They're easier to deal with, they don't rip at the edges. Definitely a better buy if you can get what you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the 35 gram is the stronger one, isn't it, from memory? But I know that the 35 gram one is better insulation and also easier to handle. But the really cheap thin ones, like you say, they can tear to bits just in wind, or you have a couple of badges on the field. Anybody else trying fleece?
Yeah, we use it a lot. We have to, but I don't class it as single use. We use it for quite a few years, and as long as we can stop the mice eating it when it's not in use, making nests right the way through it, then it's good to go for several years. I have had mice eat holes right the way through a brand new roll. So I've had a hole spaced every so often all the way along. But yeah, I mean, if you take care of it, obviously maybe not on a tractor scale on as big as this, but on a small scale, you can use it loads of times.
Yeah, I've seen really old fleece, sort of ancient fleece, rolled out in pumpkins, and the crop is sort of put on the fleece to stop it getting dirty in September, October, and that seems to be quite successful, especially on farms where they have to package it into cardboard boxes. Right, I think that'll do us, Ben. We can have the next one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that the thicker grades you could actually use them again and again. So that's
the thicker ones are a lot more strong, and they also give you more frost protection. So it's win-win really, but they are a bit dearer. But if you use them 3 or 4 times, then the cost is quite cheap. What about mesh projects like Wonder Mesh and Agralan? Anybody using that? I think you've had to go with that, haven't you, William?
Yes, I do use it. I usually use it with transplants for protection just for the first few weeks. But I do try and get it off as soon as I can, try and let the natural systems take care of pest control now, if possible.
Well, Wonder Mesh is it's a sort of long-lasting thing, so it will last up to 10-15 years. So you can use it for years on end, and it's durable, and it's sort of double seamed on the edges. And if you, again, like Emma said, if you're careful with it, it's but it keeps off anything big like deer and pigeons, rabbits, etc. And it'll also keep off bigger insects. So it's quite a useful material.
I use Enviromesh against pests, very fine. It works for carrot root fly and stuff. But I've got another mesh that's supposed to be a replacement for fleece. I can't remember what the brand name is, but it does work. It's heavier than fleece, so it sits heavy on the plants. But I struggle to believe it's going to work because it's more like a net than it is a complete cover. So I don't trust it as much, but it is supposed to hold the heat as well, if not better, than fleece.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, carrot fly is quite a big thing. I think most Wonder Meshes and that type will keep a carrot fly out, maybe not a midge.
Yeah, maybe the other material you mean is Cozy Tech, which is like a sort of woven material which does have some thermal capability. And it does seem durable, it will last. But the dream material that lasts for years and keeps insects out on these thermals yet to be invented. We can hope. It's just the different, materials for slightly different things, isn't it? And the time to get them on and off is, systems to do that's always the challenge. But yeah, it depends on your scale.
I know there's a lot of Swedes in Scotland fleeced over because they've got no chemicals for cabbage root fly in Sweden, and there's a zero tolerance with supermarkets. So if you go up to around 5, you'll see from cattle produce and ESG, you'll see probably 200-300 hectares of fleet of wonder mesh up there on top of Swedes, and that's a different. The management of it is like a whole different climate under that sheet to what it is outside. Right, next one. Can we get that full screen, Ben, or is that beyond our technical capabilities?
Fortunately, that's the way the slides
How was it? Okay,
template was sent over. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, so we got the mulching films. So, well, imagine most people have sort of seen or have a bit of experience. It's kind of trenched in, using a tractor. And yeah, so they often have pre-cut holes, to whatever spacings you ask for. They can be sort of black or white, and the idea is they're going to accumulate heat into the ground much more efficiently. They're also relatively cost effective. Some of them now are recyclable and biodegradable, which is useful. They also do suppress weeds around the plant. And because the plant is growing sort of through it, you can spray, an ordinary with a boom sprayer, which is handy. You do obviously need a tractor, really. You could theoretically do it by hand, I suppose, but it depends on your acreage and how keen you are. So it's sort of, I guess, a semi-skilled tractor operator would do it fairly well. Or make a tidy job. And I mean, from what I understand, other people might know differently, that there are unfortunately still a lot of it is single use. Not ever. It's a bit more expensive apparently for particularly the biodegradable plastics. So I understand not everyone's using them. It's sort of more shoulders of the season. So typically the springtime is when it's used. So yeah, don't know if anyone's like to add anything else.
Well, in my experience, these mulching films are either used on very big farms where they got a lot of kit and they can put on 3 rows at once and drill through it at the same time, or plant through it, or it's used on small farms for sort of short-term weed control, or for weed control on perennial plants. And like I said, I've been in Wales the last couple of days and I've seen 2 growers there using Mypex, which is a sort of 10-year life, reusable, and just making holes in the Mypex and planting through the hole, so it's giving you 80% weed control. And I've seen the last 2 days strawberries and salad crops, etc., growing on that system. Seems a good system to me.
I've seen it in greenhouses with people planting plugs by hand through the holes, that sort of thing.
So that's quite useful. Black and white, we used to have a big thing about white polythene was a lot cooler and delayed crops, and black didn't, but there was only like days in it. It was never like a massive thing. And then we went through a bad period where we had red and blue, and we had brown, but fortunately that trend died out. It's good for soft fruit, good for strawberries and crops like that that's down 2 or 3 years. And the recyclable is good. The biodegradable is good on things like sweet congs. That gives it a good start, which quite a few places in Wales need, as we could see from Ben's map. And the biodegradable does give it a good start. In fact, the big scale growers use it on their first sowing when they're sowing 1st of April.
Yeah, and the carrot boys, we'll see in a minute, use it for their earlies and what have you.
Yeah, good.
Shall I go on to the next one, unless anyone else has? So yeah, have a little look at tunnels, which I suppose would be the next step. So yeah, without wanting to tell anyone how to suck eggs, you've got the sort of the single span option, the sort of lower picture here. You do have the sort of Spanish style with the removable multi hoops that go on, and you can remove the plastic seasonally. And then you have the fixed multi hoops or multi spans, which have a fixed plastic and goes across again and again. So I guess the big advantage here is that you do have the potential for sort of true 12-month cropping, depending on what you're growing in them. You do have a bit more control over humidity and temperature. You can open the doors at the end, you can roll the sides up, that sort of thing. It does accommodate sort of vining crops a bit better. So if you wanted to grow tomatoes and anything that needs sort of stringing up, that system lends itself very well to that. And obviously a bit more longevity potentially in the plastic, because well, if it's looked after properly, and obviously the metal structure itself, it's going to last quite a while potentially. If you're not in too much of a windy area, people do put windbreaks and what have you up sometimes, or plant trees. They're obviously a bit more expensive, bigger investment in the metal work and what have you. Depending on the operation, it's not so easy for sort of boom spraying, although some of the multi-spans do have sort of boom spraying equipment you can use inside. So it will tend to use more sort of handheld type equipment, although yeah, some growers have found ways around that. The sort of keeping a control on the temperature and what have you, I suppose requires a bit more of a skilled operator, but you know, it's not rocket science. And you can now get automated systems to roll up and down the sides, which link through to sort of small computers, which are linked to temperature sensors, which is obviously more cost, but you know, solves a problem. And irrigation systems will need to be used, because you know, you're not getting any water inside, so that's another complication and an extra cost. But you know, drip irrigation systems don't have to be expensive and can be implemented fairly easily. So yeah.
I think there's a lot of us on the call that's got fixed tunnels, so I don't know about anyone else's comments about whether they use them in the winter or they use them in the summer for tomatoes, or they double crop and then they tear the tomatoes out, say in October, and come in with some winter salad, or you know, what sort of crop ranges are we doing in them? Any comments?
Tunnels are great. We always say to trainees and younger people that, you know, polytunnels are always profitable. Outdoors, you know, can be more marginal. Can be profitable.
Yeah, well, when I worked for DEFRA, when they classified land that was going to be eligible or not, you could multiply your tunnel areas by 5, and glasshouse areas were multiplied by 10. So I think a multiplication of 5 to your cropping area isn't far wrong.
Yeah, especially if you're utilising the space vertically as well as through the season, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think quite a few people use them for propagation, and then they move on to growing a crop in them, and then maybe try and get some winter crops actually in the soil beds. So you know, very, very adaptable, and it's nice if you're on a smaller unit to be self-sufficient in plant production. So you know, growing your own modules, etc., is a good way to go on. And then you know, if you get a tunnel, you can pack a huge amount of plants into it, especially if you've got a few racks and shelves and that in it.
Yeah, I don't think there are many downsides to tunnels. I think the challenge is planning permission, and there's a whole, you could have a whole seminar, have several seminars on planning case studies around polytunnel production, but on small units, small to medium units, you know, that's relevant to a lot of sort of well sites, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, it's a big subject. The tunnel itself and the technologies, you know, it's pretty well understood. That's all a go, and I think, as we're all saying, they're profitable and great. It's just they're even in the new Welsh horticultural grant scheme, which has been really encouraging to see that taking place. We have more salad crop in the ground inside than we do outside. If you actually do the numbers, to do 12-month salad production, the tunnel's going to be taking the strain, despite all the outdoor stuff we do as well. We never have empty indoor space for long. It's a premium space.
Yeah, going on with that, I think it gives you a lot more scope for programming as well, because the programs tend to work a lot better indoors than they do out.
I'd just like to say, when you take the tomatoes or your summer crop site, you can have plants ready in modules then to go straight into the tunnel. So, you know, you can, you know, as you say about the programming, it means you can use the space if you're producing plants in modules. Yes, they're never empty really, but you do need fertility, and you need some compost or something like that.
Yeah. Right, any more comments? So I think we mostly agree with tunnels being a really good investment, and you know, if the smaller the unit you're on, the more production you can get. But you know, there's a fair bit of management in them as well. But I think it's well rewarded. So my view is get as many as the planners allow you to put up.
Do you want to say something, Emma?
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the planners, because the planners wouldn't give us permission for our tunnels, but in the end we proved that they were temporary structures, and as temporary structures you're allowed to put them up. So technically you don't need planning. You've just got to prove to the planners that they are temporary structures, which means no cement. And if you're growing in Mid Wales where I am, you can't grow without polytunnels. Well, you can't make a profit without polytunnels, I should say.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So you find that you can convince them that they're temporary?
Yeah, no, we did convince them they were temporary. Yeah, we had to get a county councillor on our side to convince them, but yeah, they wouldn't give us planning permission because there was nothing already on the field. But in the end, we proved that all our buildings are temporary structures. We had to put our barn onto skids and things like that.
All right. Wow, so there might be a way through.
You'll find in the chat I've just put a couple of links, one to a past webinar on planning permission, and also the link to the second windows of horticultural development grants.
Okay, in the interest of time,
Yeah, go on with it.
The next one, just to probably rattle through this one a bit more quickly, sort of, I think was already a point that was already brought up, that you can actually incorporate fleece inside your polytunnel. So particularly if you've got sort of like if your ends of your polytunnel are east-west, the north side of the polytunnel, the long side, you can put it fleece up against that side to try and, because you're not getting any sunlight, particularly in the middle of winter, through that side anyway, with the sun being low. So putting a bit of fleece up there can help you gain a couple of degrees. And you can also put hoops inside. It's not going to be a perfect frost-proof solution necessarily if you get, you know, -10 for a fortnight or what have you, but it should help, particularly with the hoops inside. And I think that was previously mentioned. The only thing, if you were thinking about modules and you left them under there for a long time, you might potentially get a little bit of stretching because it's just not getting enough light to the heat ratio potentially. But the only thing to sort of watch out for. But yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to sort of comment more quickly on that before we draw this section to a close.
Well, just to say, for example, in tunnels, if you've got standard bed widths and you've got your fleece to the right size, it's just coming up with a basic system of reeling it in and out. For example, a cane within a plastic water pipe means that you've got a means of two people swiveling the fleece out pretty quickly and rolling up slightly more quickly, and little hand rollers and systems of doing it you can just about make do. But certainly in a tunnel you can have kind of standardized sort of material. Rolling in and out outdoors is a bit more challenging, but when we've got severe weather, it's got to be an option we need to keep available, and it's having that handy winter blanket you can pull in when you have to.
Yeah, right. That'll do for that. Then, Ben.
Brilliant. And yeah, this one's fairly self-explanatory, as you were saying. Get lots of things in there for the middle of your growing season, like extra heat units. So there's lots of options for that part of the season. So yeah, we've already kind of covered this in the end through each slide. So we'll go straight into the next section. I can't claim this idea. It's one of Chris's. I don't know. Do you want to introduce the concept?
Well, the concept came originally from people talking about cash flow. So I thought, well, if you want a cash flow, you need a crop flow as well. So I've always sort of worked on this as a guide to If you're doing box schemes and that, it gives you some sort of guide to what crops you can have every week, and what you need to buy in and when. So it's a sort of just so if you're doing boxes or anything, you can just keep it going. It's quite an interesting technique, really. But you know, they buy a combination of crops and having the number of things that you want in your bag or your box, then you can work out a decent spread, at least for 7-8 months. I know a lot of people pack up their box schemes, etc., in the winter, but you know, you can get a good range of products, especially if you've got tunnels, in that 7-8 months, maybe even longer.
Okay, so some of the sort of parts to this is variety selection, which we'll go into in a minute. You know, your sort of early crops and your later crops. Mesh, I guess, as we've already been talked about, is quite an integral part. You know, particularly to keep off, well, insects, but also, as Chris was saying, you know, keeping off the birds in the middle of the winter, or the deer, or you know, anything else that's going to want to try and eat your crops through the middle of the winter. And yeah, and sort of that succession, planting successionally, you know, and programming. I suppose one of the things that a lot of people do in their programs, and again, sorry if I'm telling anyone how to suck eggs, but calendars, all the weeks are organized into numbers. And so that's a really useful way of helping structure your program. Is you can, don't know if you can make out in that calendar there, you know, that first week in January is week 1, and so on. It's quite a nice, it helps you with sort of Excel. It just makes life a bit easier when you're planning things out. So yeah, the importance really is of having a plan, a program, and also recording. So making sure that every year, you know, you've got a record of when you sowed it, when you transplanted it, when you planted it out, and when you harvested it. So that sort of helps you build up your repertoire, and work out which different varieties are working well in your own area. And obviously they'll be different year to year. So yeah, so it's thinking about the crop throw. You know, it's always sort of, I guess, a case of working things back. You know, working out in week whatever in the middle of summer. You know, what do I want? How much do I want to harvest? So sort of working your numbers back. Obviously, the gap between planting and harvesting is longer in the tails of the season. So that's obviously something that changes and will change a bit through the seasons. So a lot of this is really, you know, trial and error, a sort of variety, interaction of variety and local microclimate. But yeah, I'm sure I'm not sort of saying anything new to most people, but yeah, does anyone else have any comments?
One thing I always think about is speculative plantings that you know, in a good year they make it, in bad year they don't. But if they do make it, it can be quite useful. So I would be tempted to do some speculative planting. You know, that obviously the latest date you sow depends on the crop, but if you're brave, you could certainly get some good results. Sometimes you don't, but you know, most years you do. And that's right, like Ben sort of mentioned 2 or 3 times, you're always nibbling away at the edges of the season. So we've been through a spell of, I don't know, 8 years when we haven't really had a winter. We got caught out of it this year, but some speculative crops do really well. These programs also apply to flowers and the week numbers and that, so you can work out, you know, getting flowers more or less every week, starting off with daffs and going through to chrysanthemums and whatever, and dahlias in the autumn. So you can have a crop flow on flowers just as much as you can on food.
Yeah, I mean, we often suggest to people to start, say, with Joy Lark, and you know, the veg summary book of dates is still a pretty good Bible to kick off with. And you know, you build your chart like this for each of your crops, and you keep adding each year into your experiences, because, you know, as has been said, you know, your own local circumstances push the dates around, and you know, the variability we've encountered in recent years is greater. So therefore the risk factors are becoming slightly greater, and it nudges the dates around each year. But you just keep building your data and try and get it better each year, you know, against the risks that pop up.
Interesting.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'll skip on to the next slide. So this is, I can't claim this one. This is come from Vital Seeds. They just got quite a nice little pictographic illustrations that they have on a number of their products that they sell. So as you can see, for example, there's 4 vegetables I've selected here, which has the potential to be grown all year round, with obviously with some help from some protection. So yeah, as you can see, you know, it's all about that, you know, about the planning to, for example, you know, if you're wanting to harvest all the way through the year. So another one here, some things which sort of will be going on to the next section in a minute about the hungry gap, which is sort of around the April-May time. So there's some things which are going to fall, you know, either before or after sort of that hungry gap period. And there's this one, or these two particularly good, the nice illustration here with cabbage. So for your spring cabbage, you're looking to sort of start planting from July through to September to get that March, April time. Then for your summer cabbage, you're looking to plant in sort of March to May, for sort of June through to October. And then for your winter cabbage, you're looking to plant sort of April, June, again, but obviously, you know, depending on your variety selection, in order to, because some are going to grow late, slower and quicker. And then, yeah, just sort of some more options there of interest. And the carrots is something that we'll cover in the next section in the hungry gap. So yeah, anyone else wanted to say anything?
One thing is that if you get a lot of seed catalogues, especially the good ones, they'll all have programs for cauliflower and other sort of sequentially planted broccoli and that sort of thing, and it gives you the variety and how long they crop in the season. And you know, that is a good, like Ben's got the pictures of there, they do those sort of pictures, and they'll have like 20 varieties and types of cauliflowers, and they'll tell you which one to plant, sow and plant when, and when it's likely to crop. And then you have to use your own interpretation to see whether it's relevant to your area. I mean, this year we've been caught out a bit, and you know, a lot of sort of speculative cauliflower and broccoli and purple, and that's been wiped out with this December cold spell. But you know, normally it wouldn't. So you know, you just have to bend a bit with the seasons. We can't really do much about minus. Some areas had -12, I think, in December 20. There was a week of it didn't get above freezing, so apparently it's wiped out nearly every cauliflower in Lincolnshire this year.
Yeah, just to reinforce the seasonal extension theme, I mean, overwinter brassicas in tunnels is quite a big deal for protected cropping. I think there's still a bit of catch-up going on in the sense that certain crops, spring cabbage, the looser ones, Cavolo Nero, they're hugely productive for hungry gap crops. Maybe Ben's going to say a bit more about that perhaps, but some of those charts can change, and the dates are quite challenging with the sowing dates in the sort of late summer, autumn to get the crop out, you know, to fall into your hungry gap. But it gives us, you know, emphasize the need for tunnels usage to stretch into that 12-month production and make some crops available when, you know, conventional supermarkets are just bringing Spanish versions of it from a long way away that we could produce on our doorstep, albeit in expensive tunnel space.
Good oak. So going into the last section about the hungry gap. So as already been said, it's typically April, May into early June, but it does just depend on the year. If you've got a very cold winter or a very cold spring, it can be flexed. It's not a fixed period. So I suppose, yeah, as has just been said, you know, growing in tunnels and growing things which do have frost tolerance is definitely one of your best allies there in achieving that. And there's a sort of list of some things which would potentially do quite well in that scenario. So yeah, so just to kind of say how carrot growers manage to do things or have a supply all year round. So they're starting off in the mulching films that we saw back at the beginning, often in Penzance, which, as we saw in the frost-free chart, we actually have similar microclimates around some parts of Wales. So they'll be drilling November, February, with a harvest from June till August. Then you've got what they call the green top, which is the standard open field production, drilled March, April, harvested from August, sort of essentially through to the first frosts. And then to bridge the gap across the hungry gap, they have the straw carrots, which is when essentially, well, they're drilled April to June, and then they start harvesting them around the time of the first frost, which in some areas of the country can be, you know, sort of November, December time. And at that point, they lay often black polythene and then straw at around 30 to 35 Heston bales an acre. And that just means that it's there, sort of stored in the ground, ready to be lifted when it's needed. Does anyone else want to chip in here?
Well, I think this this black polythene straw applied on carrots is a big technique now, and if you're fortunate, you can get carrots through to the middle of June, and by probably third week in June, you start getting carrots coming in from the sort of cliff top fields in well, potentially in Wales, but also in round Norfolk, and there's a tiny little gap, and the smaller the gap, the less imported produce we need to fill it up. And we're similar position with leeks now. We can just about get in a year when everything goes well, we can just about get 12 months of leeks. A lot of it's not to do with what we're doing, it's to do with supermarkets wanting crops at odd seasons, and then people see leeks in Aldi and they want them from us, but we're sort of more storing leeks in a field. If you get the good blue leeks, they'll stand pretty much anything, and we're talking probably marketing leeks September to end of April, not trying to go for that sort of really tricky May, June period.
Okay, so the next slide is on perennial crops. So I'll hand this one over to Chris.
Yeah, well, I mean, asparagus is one of the crops that does come in the hungry gap, and it's the sort of high value crop. I don't know if we got anybody on the call that grows asparagus. It doesn't seem to be a big shout on it. Anybody doing it?
I've sown seeds, just sown seeds.
Oh yeah, you've got seeds, haven't you, William?
Yeah, they haven't germinated yet. I've sown about 300.
Yeah, well, it's a good crop because it can sort of define a farm shop, and when a farm shop gets going, and you know, you'll get, although it says you've got to wait 2 years to establish the crowns, then you can get sort of 10 or 15 years production out of a field, and it's crops late April if you're in a climatically advantaged area, and goes on. We have to stop cutting it on the 21st of June to allow the fern to regenerate the crop for the following year. Otherwise, we start gradually reducing the yield year on year. But it's if you can sell it at the back door and get a decent price for it, you know, in Wales we have been achieving 12 to 15 pound a kilo for it, which is good money. If you sell it on the wholesale market, then you're sort of down to £2 and £3 a kilo, which doesn't make it very attractive. But it's one of the crops that if you put a board up in the road saying asparagus for sale, then people will come off the road for it. And there aren't many in that category. So I think it's a crop we got some potential for. It does use up a lot of land because it's only yielding 2 ton an acre. Whereas something like carrots will yield what, 40 ton an acre. But you know, very, very high value and sought after. Rhubarb is a sort of crop. Sorry, somebody say something. Any comment? Well, you're obviously having to go, William. See how you get on with it.
Yeah, I think it's a good crop for anyone who's selling veg. with the
I think you've got
perennial
to just,
aspect.
you just got to make sure you site it somewhere where it doesn't matter if it goes on 10 years, so it's not going to be stuck in the middle of your plot.
Yeah, yeah.
So will you do it no dig then, or how will you do it?
Yeah, I haven't worked out how I'm not gonna put it through MyPex. I'm staying away from that, but I'm gonna try and work a way of mulching it. I'm thinking maybe grass and cardboard and grass clippings I might try. I've used that system before, as long as it doesn't attract too much slugs.
Yeah, well, they do get affected by slugs, but
Yeah.
one of the good things about asparagus, it does disappear in November and doesn't reappear till March. So you got a good chance of putting some sort of cover crop on it, or putting something impermeable to weed on the top and controlling your weeds, you know, by just completely covering it.
Yeah.
We did do some trials for these European innovation partnerships, and one of them was organic asparagus, which we did up in Monmouth, and that has been quite successful. You know, we did a hectare each on 2 farms, and we control the weeds by continual earthing up of the crop as it grew, and then by the end of the season you could sort of break that ridge down and use the same system for the following year, and that seemed to be working out quite well. So we're on to it's all written up now. It is published on the Mentor website. So, but it's quite an interesting way of cropping asparagus organically, and building up the row. Every time you get weed in, you go through and sort of cultivate and ridge, and that does seem to be successful, or it's, you know, certainly been successful down in Monmouth. Rhubarb, yeah, crop I'm very close to. I've worked with rhubarb a long time. It's again, it comes in that if you got timperley early, it'll start pulling sometime in March normally, and a lot of scope with it, because you can do the indoor forced crop, which you dig your rhubarb out of the field and bring it into a shed, keep it about 10 degrees, and you'll get crop December to March, when it's between 8 and 15 pound a kilo. So it's very, very high value, very sought after by chefs, etc. if you're working with restaurants and that. Field forced, big scale, you put black polythene tunnels over it. Smaller scale, you can put various types of containers and crates and that on it, and you get a really sort of forced type product, high value, and that comes March, April time. You can get a bit longer than that. And then the green pull or garden rhubarb, April to July, but nowadays we harvest right through supermarket rhubarb till October. And then we've got this variety Livingstone, which sort of takes us through, this year it went October to mid-December till we had the cold. So, you know, you get a really long season out of it, and it's sort of old school, but it's quite popular and everybody knows it. So it's not like, you know, you're not breaking ground with sort of exotic crops. Everybody knows rhubarb, and they all sort of say, well, we used to have a clump in the garden at home, and, you know, people get used to eating it. But it is very much promoted by chefs, so I think it's got a, you know, it's got a place. And rhubarb, once planted, you can crop it for 5 years or more. So another interesting one. It's classed by some authorities, including DEFRA, as a fruit, not a vegetable. So surely there's some of us doing rhubarb.
I've ordered some crowns for delivery.
You got some crowns ordered?
Yeah.
Good start. It does well outside, and I don't think anybody's growing it in tunnels because it would just get massive in the summer, but it'd be good, you know, it's a good standby. And if you're doing veg boxes, it's good to just brighten up the box a bit. Not many followers yet then, but hopefully 1 or 2 will have a go at it.
I grow a few rhubarb, not on a huge scale. Timberley early, just try and get that early crop. But I find the stems are very thin, and people like the big, fat, chunky stems.
Yeah, it's quite a big feeder. So if you're feeding with you know, organic systems, you need to get a fair bit of some sort of, you know, maybe poultry derived sort of product on it to get it to grow a bit, because it's a, you know, it is a big feeder. But eventually it gets strong, and it's an interesting crop because when it grows in March, it's not using fertilizer out the field. It's using it gets the feed out of the crown, so you don't really need to feed it till April, May. But you would need to put some, decent levels of mulches, etc., on to make sure it gets that enough feed. If you don't get enough feed on it, the sticks will be thin, and if you over pull it, it can, you can sort of virtually eliminate it. So you've got to sort of rest it, and it's a bit of a skill to keep the crop going. But the thing is not to not keep hammering it. So if you give it a very, very late pull, then don't pull that the following year, or if you do pull it the following year, don't pull it till sort of July, August time. Again, with if you get a dry time, it does need water. But it's an interesting one. And it is in the Hungry Gap.
Okie doke. So just finishing off now, things that you can store easily. So onions, you can put them in strings, boxes, sacks. They like a bit of ventilation, but they'll stand some frost, which is handy. Or if you do have access to a proper store, if you're growing on a large scale, but that's very energy intensive. Potatoes, again, boxes, bags, do like some ventilation, and you will need to protect them from frost. Swedes, boxes, nets, that sort of stuff. Bit of ventilation, but then they will stand a bit of frost. And Chris has got a point about frozen ground. Do you want to?
Well, I think it's a lot of these crops, like leeks and Swedes especially, and some of the brassicas, are sort of stored in fields. So we just, carrots as well, and you just could keep harvesting them as and when. But if you get a bit of a blitz like we've just had, it can make that system go bad. So when I was in Wales last couple of days, there was even Swedes, which are usually bone hardy, that had been wiped out because they grew quite late with the mild November, and then the frost sort of came a bit out of the blue, and even it sort of got into the necks of Swedes and went right down through them. So if you'd have had this sort of plan to bring some into the warm or into a storage shed or your spud shed or whatever, then you would have, and parsnips and carrots, you would have been able to keep going when that frost was on. It caught a lot of caught out a lot of the big players because they were, they just couldn't get the machines in the ground because it was frozen solid. And they had to sort of start digging carrots to maintain their orders from under their expensive system of straw and black polythene they were hoping to get in June. So that's been quite a difference this year over the previous years. But it is possible, like leeks, they store well in fields, if you can call it a store.
Yeah, and then squashes.
Squashes, yeah, I mean, squashes are up and coming crop, and they get more popular every year, deservedly, because they're very, very good. But some of these squashes are really productive, and that Amoro there, which is a sort of Japanese onion squash, weighs about a kilo and a half. And if you grow it well, you can get up to 12 squashes on one plant. So that gives you a good lot to store. And I mean, if you've got them in 10 degrees plus, don't keep them cold because they don't like it. And keep them 10 degrees plus, they'll keep till April, as long as you weed out any that start to go soft. But if they're well ripened, they'll keep really well, and all the time they're gaining in popularity. We get these butternut squash, which difficult to grow in this country, and if you do, they don't mature. But these things are they can set a good tough skin on them, and they'll store for a long time. So most of the butternut squash people think is grown in the UK is actually grown either in Venezuela or Senegal or somewhere. So it's a lot of road miles and ship miles and whatever. I think a lot of it comes from Turkey, but we want to be trying to get stuff that people can grow in Wales. So yeah, bit of a fan of the edible squashes.
Yeah, I think squash has still got a long way to go. They're not completely commodified in the UK, i.e. they will get sold at cheaper prices, but at the moment they still fetch a slightly better price, and they're always a big part of our Hungry, running up to the Hungry Gap plan all through the winter. It's just getting them cured either in the field or once you get them in cured properly, and then having that that insulated warm storage, you know, sort of aim at 12, 13, and, you know, as long as you keep them steady and keep the humidity right, then they're a great crop. I would say they were one of the more profitable outdoor crops. Some pretty good basic systems for spacings and cultivation, and
yeah, well,
as long as you got somewhere sheltered and you know, dealing with the wind and the early establishment of the crop, then after that the rest of it's relatively straightforward. Something we could certainly do more of.
Yeah, it's a good point, because you mentioned an important factor there. You've got to sort of ripen them off. So when we were doing, we looked at, so again on an EIP, we looked at calcium and the effect on storage in pumpkins, and we got some papers from the States, and they were saying cure your pumpkins, etc. at well, they were saying 80 degrees. Obviously they're in Fahrenheit over there, but you're probably talking curing them at 30 degrees if you've got it. Getting a really, you know, really good dry skin on them. So yeah, it's good to see a bit of support for that, because I think it's an up and coming crop, and it's very attractive in the box, and it's very versatile, and keeps for a long time. So I'm a bit of a fan there. Right. We've come to time now. We'll keep going to the end.
I think this is the last slide, actually, I hope. Bit of a novel one to throw in there is the old watercress. So you can sort of, one of those things, you can sow it and harvest it pretty much any time through the year. It's sort of traditionally grown, at the top left hand picture you can see there in streams running through sort of ponds, typically the sort of chalk streams. But you can grow it outside of soil sort of stream environments. So you could use things like mushroom trays with perlite. You could maybe use old sort of strawberry bags with the coconut coir in it. You could do sort of hydroponically. So some people grow it in the gutter system, which is what they call NFT. So you can put gravel inside. You could probably, if you had enough coir, you could put it in there, or some people use different types of growing medias. So that's sort of the middle picture on the left. You've got the deep water systems, but they're obviously a bit more expensive. It's sort of like a big sort of paddling pool type system with the styrofoam trays and the little plugs in it. But you can obviously do sort of make your own systems as well. You've got the ebb and flood, which is a fancy word for sort of the trays where you can put them in pots and what have you, or on little smaller trays within the trays. So you sort of flood your bed and it just drains off, which is the bottom left. And then you've also got the aeroponic systems, if you wanted to, which is sort of growing in a sort of like a sealed suitcase, if you will, with little holes and plugs in the top. And then you've got typically nozzles, like sprayer nozzles, creating a mist underneath. All, you know, sort of different levels of investment. But I suppose the key thing is actually the crop wants to be below 20 degrees. And it grows really very happily all the way through the winter. So it's a good candidate for the hungry gap. And yeah, an EC about 1.6 if you're fertigating. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has got any points.
Well, we've been discussing watercress lately, and on my recent tour of Wales, I did see actually 3 growers growing it, so it's a bit more established than we thought. But it's quite interesting that one of them was growing it on the holes in my PEC system we discussed earlier. So as it got faggy in the bottom, for want of a better word, they cut it hard back and started again. And the only time they were missing out was late spring. They just kept going to flower, so they missed that period. But they were doing spring, autumn, and winter. But quite a good climate area.
Yeah, just to very much emphasise watercress. Certainly in a tunnel system winter season, it is the most profitable thing in horticulture in our experience and has been for some years. But
Yeah,
there's some small to medium growers, there's some recognition of it, but the fact that it can fit into existing systems and got that nice winter hungry gap run up is pretty attractive. But yield per square foot, I don't think we've got anything else to match it. And we
No.
always emphasize to people it's something, you know, in the ground. Other techniques, as Ben is saying, with hydroponics and other ways of doing it, mean that there's more to look at. But within existing tunnel and protected small grower technology, well within our growth.
could have added vertical to that, Ben.
Yeah, no, definitely the NFTs or the ebb and floats and the hydroponics grow well in a vertical system, though with current energy prices, yeah, maybe not the best idea.
It shows though how you can adapt a crop, because I mean traditionally it's grown in sort of 9 meter wide concrete beds with gravel bottoms, fed with a sort of chalk stream spring that's coming out about 10 degrees. So you're getting a lot of, you know, big advantages. And they cut it 5 times a year, and the actual gross outputs they get in are like telephone numbers in money. But you know, we can adapt this and work with it in Wales on on one of those many systems. So it shows that you can be versatile on your approach to a crop, and you know, normally even if you're sort of fairly high up in mid Wales, you can make it work.
Has anyone else grown any watercress?
Did you have some watercress, Emma? Oh, stunned silence, right.
Okay, yeah, I think that was it actually. I mean, we've been through everything. That's sort of just a summary of everything we've sort of discussed today. So, yeah.
Many thanks, Ben and Chris, for an informative session. I think there were some comments at the beginning about people were interested in a copy of the slides and that the climate map at the beginning. So we'll share those around with everybody. Thank you, Adam, for your participation, and everybody else for joining, and Emma and William for participating in the chat as well. Thank you. Just a note to say that this is part of the Veg Winter Webinar sessions. So we do have a session coming up on the 9th of Feb, which Ben, you're on as well with your colleague Lynn. So the 9th of February, and we're looking at weed management in veg production, and that's at 4 p.m. I'll put that in the chat just before we all leave. There is a full programme as well, so there's another 2 sessions after that looking at nutrient use efficiencies and disease in salad crops. So check it all out. It's all on the Knowledge Hub. It's under the training programmes page. But that just leaves me to say thank you once more, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.